Most people think red gemstones basically begin and ends with ruby, but the world of red gemstones is much bigger than that and much stranger than that, I have to say. Some red gemstones cost just a few dollars per carat, others are so rare that only a handful of them exist on Earth. Some red feels soft and romantic, other feels dark, dramatic, and almost dangerous. And unlike blue gemstones or green gemstones, red tends to create a very emotional reaction. This video continues the series of best gemstones for the engagement rings, so if you haven't seen the previous one, check them out in the description. Today we are ranking red engagement ring stones from the least expensive to the most expensive, including natural stones, historical materials, collector gems, lab-created options as well, and eventually some of the rarest stones on Earth. Before we start, here's how to read the information on the screen. For every stone you will see approximate price range per carat. For engagement ring quality material specifically, not a museum piece. You will also see the Mohs hardness scale, which measures the scratch resistance, and once you go below around 7, stones usually require more care for long-term daily wear. We also show rarity. It means how difficult the gem quality material actually to find, because sometimes it can take months. You'll also see the care level, which is basically how careful you need to be with the stone in a real life. And finally, every stone has a specific trait, some visually or historically unique, that made it important to the jewelry world. Alright, let's get started with the oldest red mineral human ever used. Carnelian has been used in jewelry for thousands of years. Ancient Egyptians, Romans, Mesopotamians all worked with the carnelian long before modern faceted gemstone became popular. The stone itself is transparent, reddish-orange variety of quartz, and instead of the sparkles, the beauty comes from the warmth internal glow, almost like a sunlight passing through the amber. Historically, carnelian was associated with the courage, protection, and power. Romans and yet rings were often carved with the carnelian partly because the polished surface of it released the wax impressions clearly. Compared to the ruby, carnelian feels much earthier and more ancient. It's a more of a historical artifact than the luxury gemstones. Red coral is not technically a mineral, it's an organic material created by marine organisms. But in jewelry history, red coral has been important for thousands of years, especially in the Mediterranean. Italian coral craftsmanship became legendary, particularly around Naples. The most valuable color historically became known as the oxblood coral, a deep rich red almost borderline the burgundy. And unlike faceted gemstone, coral creates softer, made kind of luxury, almost velvety. Today, coral is much more complicated than it used to be. Environmental restriction and sustainability concerns heavily affect the market, which also made the fine, untreated coral harder to find. When most people imagine garnet, this is usually the color they think about. Pyrope garnet tends to look brighter and cleaner red. Almandine garnet usually appears darker, sometimes almost like a dark red wine under candlelight. Historically, garnet became especially popular during the Victorian era, and Czech garnet became famous for those dense clusters of deep red stones. Compared to the ruby, garnet usually feels moodier, heavier, and more antique. But they also offer one of the easiest way to get a rich natural red gemstone without ruby pricing it. Red zircon might be one of the most underrated gemstones in the jewelry. At first, it has nothing to do with the cubic zirconia. Natural zircon is the real gemstone, and some zircon crystals are over 4 billion years old, making them among the oldest materials on Earth. The biggest surprise is sparkle. Red zircon produced extremely strong fire and brilliance. Under jewelry store lighting, some stones almost flash orange-red fire in every direction. The color colors often lean towards cinnamon red or amber red rather than the pure crimson. Compared to the ruby, zircon feel much more explosive visually. Quick pause. If you're shopping for an engagement ring, check our playlist in the description below. It walks you through the key parts of the process step by step so you can make a better decision with more confidence. I'd hope it helps, and I would love working together. Malaya Garnet has one of the best origin stories in colored gemstones. The name comes from the Swahili form of outcast, because when miners first discovered the stone in Tanzania, they didn't know how to classify it. The color is especially interesting. Instead of the deep blood red tones, Malaya Garnet often combine peach, orange, pink, and the reddish tones all together. Some stones almost look like a glowing sunset colors. The result feels warmer and more modern than a traditional garnet, especially in a rose gold setting. Large, clean stones with a strong color can become surprisingly expensive. Rhodolite became popular because it solved one of the biggest complaints people have about traditional garnet: darkness. Instead of the heavy brownish red tone, rhodolite usually appears brighter and more vibrant, almost raspberry color. The stone also tends to show more brilliance than darker garnet, which is why rhodolite became one of the most common garnet choices for the engagement ring. Compared to the ruby, rhodolite feels softer, less aggressive visually, and many buyers actually prefer that, especially people looking for romantic red tones rather than intense luxury red colors. Rubellite is the red variety of tourmaline, and unlike ruby, the color usually leans more towards raspberry, hot pink red, or purplish red. Some rubellite almost glow neon pink red under the jewelry store light, especially the Brazilian materials. One reason collectors care about the rubellite is that the stone often remains vivid under low lighting. That's not true for many colored gemstones. Most important source of rubellite includes Brazil, Nigeria, Mozambique, and Madagascar. The challenge is clarity here. Rubellite are heavily included most of the times, so finding bright, clear stone becomes significantly harder as the size increases. Compared to the garnet, rubellite feels brighter, more electric, and more modern. This category creates an enormous debate in the jewelry world, because ruby and pink sapphire are technically the same mineral, corundum. The difference is color, and sometimes laboratories don't even agree on where the ruby ends and pink sapphire begin. There have been cases where the same stone received the ruby's classification from one lab and the pink sapphire classification from another. Some pink sapphires develop incredibly vivid neon raspberry colors, especially materials from Madagascar and Sri Lanka. Compared to ruby, pink sapphires often feels cleaner, brighter, and slightly less formal. And in many cases, they offer similar beauty at a dramatically lower price. Most people associate topaz with the blue stones, but natural reddish topaz is dramatically rare. The finest materials historically came from Brazil, especially Minas Gerais. Sorry if I'm pronouncing those names wrong, as someone commented in the previous video, but I'm doing my best. And unlike commercial blue topaz, the color here is natural. Most Imperial Topaz actually leans orange red, pink red, golden red, rather than pure crimson. Under warm lighting, some stones almost look molten from the inside. Strong red examples are among the rarest topaz color overall. Compared to ruby, Imperial Topaz create a warmer and softer kind of luxury. Spinel spent centuries being mistaken for rubies. Some of the most famous rubies in the royal collection later turn out to be actually Spinels, including the Black Princess ruby in the British crown jewel and the Timur ruby as well. That alone tells how convincing fine red Spinel can be. Today's Spinel become one of the fastest growing collector gemstones in the jewelry world, especially because most fine Spinels are untreated. That matters more than many many buyers realize, especially in the colored gemstones. The strongest material historically came from Burma, but important stones also come from Vietnam, Tanzania, Tajikistan, and Sri Lanka. Mohs Spinel from Tanzania became especially famous for their neon pink red appearance. Compared to ruby, Spinel usually feels cleaner and brighter. Ruby often glows more intensely because of the fluorescence. Spinels reflect light more sharply, almost like a polished red glass under the strong lighting. And today many collectors intentionally choose Spinel over rubies because the value proposition is often stronger. This is where the video enters the true rarity territory. Red beryl belongs to the same mineral family as emerald and aquamarine, but unlike emerald, gem quality red beryl is found almost exclusively in Utah, and their crystals are usually tiny. Most faceted stones remain under 1 carat. The color itself is very distinct, almost raspberry crimson with unusual strong saturation. This is not a gemstone most buyers ever will see in person. Compared to ruby or spinel, red beryl feels much more collector-oriented, almost mythical in the gem world. Alexandrite isn't technically a red gemstone, but it absolutely belonged to this conversation because many buyers shopping for unusual red stones eventually discover Alexandrite. During the daylight, the stone usually appears green or bluish-greenish. Under warm indoor lighting, it shifts towards the red, raspberry, or purplish red tones. The stronger the color change, the more valuable the stone becomes, and the effect can feel almost unreal in person, especially under the candid light. Historically, Russian Alexandrites from Ural Mountains became legendary. The stone itself was named after the future Russian Emperor Alexander II. The natural Alexandrite is extremely rare, which is why lab Alexandrite became very common in jewelry. And honestly, many buyers first encounter Alexandrite in its lab form because natural stones quickly became very expensive. The color change effect still remains one of the most fascinating optical effects in the gemstone world. For a long time, Painite was considered the rarest mineral on Earth. Only a few crystals were known to exist. Later, additional minerals was found in Myanmar, but even today, faceted gem quality stone remain extremely rare. The color usually range from reddish brown to deep red orange, and most specimens end up in a museum or private collections rather than in a jewelry store. This is pure collector territory. If sapphire defines the blue gemstones, ruby defines red. No other red stones carried the same level of prestige, mythology, and emotional intensity. Historically, the most famous rubies came from Burma, especially from Maguk Valley, and the legendary color category became known as the pigeon blood. There is a different stories explained in the name. One interpretation connects it to the vivid red iris around the pigeon eyes, another linked it to the old Burmese legend. Today, laboratories like GRS formally use the term for exceptional stones with a highly saturated red color. One thing many buyers don't realize is that most rubies mined in nature are actually not a high quality. Many are heavily included, dark, brownish, or opaque. That's the majority of the market. Fine rubies is genuinely rare, and part of a ruby's beauty came from fluorescence. This is why fine red ruby can almost appear internally lit under the certain lighting, especially Burmese material. Mozambique later became one of the most important ruby sources in the modern market, often producing cleaner stones than Burma. Treatment is also a massive topic in ruby. Heat treatment is extremely common and generally accepted. Untreated stones with strong color commands enormous premiums. And then there's star rubies, where rhodolite silks create a moving star effect across the surface of the stones. One of the most famous examples ever sold was the Sunrise Ruby, a 25.6 carat Burmese ruby that sold over $30 million. Compared to Spinel's, ruby usually feels richer, deeper, and more emotionally intense. And for many buyers, ruby still remains the ultimate red gemstone. Lab rubies has a surprisingly important history. It was actually one of the earliest synthetic gemstones ever successfully produced. And for decades, synthetic rubies were used not only in jewelry, but also in watches, lasers, and scientific equipment. Chemically, lab rubies is still rubies. Modern labs can now create highly included stones, clean stones, pigeon blood-like colors, antique-looking materials, almost any ruby appearance buyers want. And compared to natural ruby, pricing become dramatically more accessible. For many buyers, lab rubies is the only realistic path towards the large vivid ruby engagement ring. Lab created red diamond opened a category that was previously almost unreachable. Because natural red diamonds are so rare that most buyers never even encountered them. Lab can now create a fancy red diamond with a significantly stronger saturation than many natural stones. And compared to the natural red diamonds, the pricing difference is enormous. This is one of the few realistic ways buyers can access the red diamond look without entering collector level territory. And finally, the red diamond, the rarest diamond color category on Earth. Scientists still don't fully understand exactly how the natural red diamonds form. The color is believed to come from the distortion in the crystal lattices during the formation, not from the trace element like many other fancy colored diamonds. Only a tiny number of true natural red diamonds are known. One of the most famous example is the Mohs red diamond, a 5.1 carat fancy red diamond, considered one of the most valuable diamonds ever discovered. Many famous red diamonds originated from the Ergul mine in Australia, which is now closed, meaning the supplies of elite natural red diamonds became even more restricted. And unlike rubies, where the beauty often comes from the glow and saturation, red diamonds feels almost unreal simply because of their rarity. At this level, stones move through the private collectors and elite auctions more than the traditional jewelry stores, which makes them the perfect ending for this list. From the ancient carved stones all the way to some of the rarest minerals on Earth. And there are also other red materials out there like jasper, strawberry quartz, and many others, but most of them are either too soft or too impractical for long-term engagement ring wear. And if one of those gemstones caught your attention, we already have a full in-depth video here on this channel about many of them, including rubies, sapphires, spinels, diamond, and engagement ring durability. So before you buy an engagement ring, I highly recommend learning about the specific stones you are considering, simply because red stones, gemstones can look, wear, and age very differently in real life. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.